This is the weekend edition of Fear and Greed, Australia's most popular business podcast. I'm Michael Thompson, and good morning, Sean Aylmer.
Morning, Michael.
I'm ready for this, Sean. Our weekend show. It's all about the two of us each nominating a very competitive environment. What we think is the biggest story of the week, the most remarkable story, a sleeper story as well, and then our favorite story, which is very subjective. The whole thing is subjective, obviously. So we need an adjudicator, a judge every week. That person is our Fear and Greed colleague, Adam Lang. Adam, good morning.
Oh, good morning, Michael.
Before we get into it, I thought it might actually help this time if you run through very quickly what you're looking for in a story. Because, I mean, it doesn't really seem to make much difference to the decisions that you make.
Yeah, why are we going down here, Michael? It is so arbitrary.
It's just like a Roman emperor, thumb up or thumb down.
Very much.
Anyhow, but there is some guiding principles that I use that won't surprise you. Number one, topicality. Number two, timeliness. Number three, economic impact. And this one is really important. And then, of course, last and not least, subjective bias, which means, of course, which one do I like better?
Whatever you want. Yeah.
See, I remember, once upon a time, wasn't there a category or wasn't there an element that allowed for flourishes, a little bit of theatre?
Well, I think that comes under the subjective bias, yes.
Oh, no,
Whether
but that's
I like
too
the
broad.
Story?
No, it should be partly based on presentation. Because
okay.
what I've realised, and this is the point that I was kind of building to, and this is obviously the reason why I asked you about this, was the last few weeks, I reckon I've had some pretty good stories. They've had good economic impact. But what I've really had was where I've lacked in detail, I've made up for it.
In drama.
And I don't think I get recognised for that.
So you want melodrama in the criteria?
Sure. I'll take that.
I'll do that this week. Let's see how we roll.
New category for melodrama. Great. Let's jump straight into it. And with a category that is almost kind of tailor-made for melodrama and hyperbole, we're looking for the biggest story of the week here. Sean, would you like to go first?
I'd love to go first because I think this is a lay-down misère. Adam, what's your biggest story of the week?
I almost fell for that.
I bet you did. Interest rates. The Reserve Bank lifted the official cash rate by 25 basis points. Basically, that means that if you have a loan of, $600, $700, $800, anything up to $1 million, over the past 12 and a bit months, your repayments have risen by somewhere between $1,500 and $2,000 a month. That is massive. And of course, you've been paying more for electricity, you've been paying more for food, all that sort of thing. Thing is, Reserve Bank thinks there still might be another rate rise in the offing. They're worried about inflation. They're worried about services inflation specifically. Now, goods inflation, fridges, stuff like that, TVs, they're not rising in price too much. And in fact, some products are actually falling in price. But services, the sort of stuff that you go, it might be education, it might be going out and spending, leisure time money, that sort of thing, that's rising far too fast. And in fact, we found that out during the week with official retail trade figures coming out, showing that services prices are rising very quickly. And that's what the Reserve Bank is worried about. The bank's looking at the labour market. They're worried about there's not enough productivity growth going on, therefore it needs to raise rates. Worried about inflation, obviously. Then they talk about consumer demand. What's really interesting with consumer demand, it is definitely coming off. Retail trade for the first 3 months of this year was flat at best. There have been companies this week, JB Hi-Fi, Super Retail Group, MCOR, the packaging group, all saying consumer demand is weaker. So we've got this economy. We've got rising interest rates. We've got certainly an economy which is slowing. People finding it really tough. Daniel Andrews, the Victorian Premier, came out this week and said the Reserve Bank was smashing families. That's all going on. Massive story for the week. Overseas, the US Fed lifted rates, although they did hint that they're looking at pausing. The budget next week is really critical to what happens next on rates, because if if Canberra comes out and starts spending money, the Reserve Bank's going to feel as if it has to tighten even more. It's actually the turn of fiscal policy to play a role in all this. So I don't know where I'm going in this, Adam. Such a big week in economics. High rates, budget next week, US lifting rates, cost of living squeeze, pretty much affecting every single Australian. Biggest story of the week. Michael, thanks for letting me go first. That's all I can say.
No worries. And Adam, I think we can safely say 0 points for melodrama. And
except for the last line, he brought it home a little bit there.
Did he?
Like that.
Yeah.
Some stories don't need melodrama, Michael. See, where I think you're falling down in this whole show week after week is you're more interested in the flourish than the fact.
Yeah, that sounds about right, actually. I think you've summed up me pretty effectively, Sean. Shall I jump into my story? And I'm going to keep the melodrama to an absolute minimum. I'm going to argue this one purely on the facts, shall we?
Yes.
And looking at your story, very good story, great story. But we've had plenty of rate rises now. We've had 11 in 12 meetings. You know what we haven't had plenty of? Qantas CEOs.
Very true. Factually, you're on song.
Exactly. Alan Joyce has been in the job for 15 years. And so this is why this is such a big story that this week the company announced that his replacement would be the group's chief financial officer, Vanessa Hudson. Now, this is arguably, you know what? Not even arguably, it is definitely the highest profile corporate job in Australia. I reckon that if you took a bunch of CEOs out into the streets, right, a big kind of parade, a lineup of CEOs.
So we're talking like the boss of Commonwealth Bank.
Yep, exactly. Rio, BHP, NAB, even Telstra. Kind of, you took them all out into the street. Big line, a big parade, a CEO kind of bonanza.
Conga line?
A conga line of CEOs out into the street. And I bet you pretty much anything, the one person that every single person walking past would be able to pick out would be the Qantas boss, more than any of the banks, more than any of the miners, because this is the people's CEO.
Wow. I'd love to hear what the union movement thinks of that comment.
That's a very good point, Sean. Well, I hadn't factored in with that. I don't feel like I may have accidentally strayed into the melodrama. Just a little bit, but I think I got away with it.
I think so.
So Qantas is obviously, I think, safe to say it's an iconic company. It's had more than its share of ups and downs. We've had Alan Joyce kind of overseeing plane groundings, the entire fleet. What was that, 2010?
Yeah, you don't like to say ups and downs with planes, but go on.
Yeah, exactly. Airfare wars. You had kind of plenty of battles, as you mentioned, Sean, with the unions. And of course, the biggest challenge ever faced by the airline was the pandemic. And you must admit that Vanessa Hudson did an impressive job, a pretty remarkable job of managing the company's balance sheet during COVID-19. The airlines recently returned to profitability. Not a bad CV at all for an incoming CEO. And also, this decision shows the power of good succession planning because Alan Joyce has been there for a long time, 15 years, as I mentioned. It also meant to have had a long time to groom a successor. And I think it says a lot about how effective that process has been, that out of 40-odd candidates for, as we've already agreed, the highest profile CEO job in the country, that the two finalists were both internal candidates. I think it sets a fantastic example for other businesses, and I'm sure you will both agree with me, and I'm not going to give you an opportunity to disagree. The week's also been, though, and at the risk of doing an Aylmer and kind of wedging a couple of other stories in here as well, it's been a big week for leadership changes elsewhere. Because high pressure, high profile roles, Qantas is number one. I'd probably say the CEO of the AFL is up there as well. Gillon McLachlan announced Andrew Dillon as his successor this week, another internal replacement. I'm sensing a bit of a theme here. Other big change was the boss of Rugby Australia stepping down. Now, that's a code that's had a pretty remarkable recovery, and I know this is the biggest story, not the most remarkable story, but you know what? It's still pretty impressive. $27 million in debt to an $8 million surplus announced last week shows clearly that sport is very big business in this country. Plenty of big moves this week, but really focusing just on Qantas, add those other ones in for a couple of bonus points, maybe toss a few points on for the flourishes throughout. Biggest story by far, Adam.
Okay, so excellent interest rates versus leadership changes. And Michael, yours is a couple of great examples there of succession planning. And with Qantas, lovely flourishes.
It doesn't look good for you, Michael, at this point.
Yeah, business has a responsibility to exist well at the intersection of commerce and community, right? And Qantas has been controversial, been run really well for shareholders, but occasionally it gets a bit of public lashing too. So interesting. However, even in composite, all of those things cannot beat for the biggest story of the week that interest rates went up. And interest rates going up was part of it, but also that it was a surprise and that there might be more to come. And I think to your point, Sean, this is around that awful word sticky and inflation.
What's wrong with the word sticky?
I don't like it. And anyway, but it's so true when it comes to inflation. It's like so many things, prices can go up.
Sticky,
under demand.
sticky.
Is it too erotic for you, Adam?
Sean wins.
Thank you.
So clearly melodrama and flourishes did nothing in that first story.
Well, they did something, just not enough.
Well, if I still didn't win and the melodrama counted towards something, then God, I must have been a long way behind on the substance of the story then.
That story wasn't that good.
The story, the CEO of the most iconic company in Australia is changing for the first time in 15 years. I think that is big news, the biggest story of the week. But I suspect I can't do anything about it now.
No, the result is sticky.
Oh, did you need to do that then, Adam? Was that really necessary?
Yeah, I didn't. Feel free to edit it out.
We will be leaving that in for sure. Most remarkable story. This feels a bit dull compared to Qantas, but the last 7 days have been a defining period for the future of energy in Australia. Where to begin with this, because it is such a big story. I'll start with the biggest element of it, the Snowy Hydro pumped storage project. Bad news there. The $5.9 billion project will overrun its already huge budget. And what's more, it's now going to be late by up to 2 years, may not be fully online until the end of the decade, which raises fears about the reliability of the East Coast electricity grid. That's bad news on a couple of fronts. It's a government-owned project. It's essentially a government-owned company that's doing this. So it is our money effectively, and any threat to the electricity grid then has the potential to push up already sky-high power prices. And the timing on all of this is very problematic. The full capacity of Snowy 2.0 won't actually be available until 4 years after the Eraring coal-fired power station is due to shut down in 2025. The other big event of the last week or so then was the Liddell power station closing after more than 50 years of burning fossil fuels to generate electricity. So clearly this transition to greener energy is underway, but all of these closures and then delays in the replacements, are we going to see a bit of a shortfall in the meantime? So this is why this week has been so critical, because we've had these two elements coming together and really highlighting the risk here. One more story that combines to make this a bit of a remarkable week for the future of energy in Australia. Electric vehicle sales are continuing to climb. They made up 8% of new car sales last month. A year ago, it was a touch over 1%. That is a very, very steep increase in just 1 year. An 800% increase.
Good flourish.
In just 1 year. What that says to me, and what that says to everyone here, you and everybody listening, it says consumer demands are changing. The behaviour of consumers in Australia when it comes to energy consumption is changing, which makes the delays to the Snowy Hydro and the closure of the coal-fired power stations even more important. And that timing just might not work out, which makes this all very remarkable. Thank you.
That was dull.
That was dull?
Well, the only reason I'm being so negative, I'm afraid, is that you actually stole one of my stories for later in the show.
Which, did I? Oh,
Oh,
well, that is...
Do we have a referee's query here?
That is most unfortunate.
Do we need a timeout, gentlemen?
No. I'll go straight into mine.
Oh, unperturbed. Go, Sean.
Unperturbed. Okay. So my most remarkable story is just how quickly the banks have fallen out of favour this week. Huge falls in the share prices of National Australia Bank in particular, but also Commonwealth Bank, ANZ and Westpac. Now, NAB reported a sharp jump in profit to over $4 billion, but it said its profit margins have peaked. Ironically, there was a fair bit of good news in NAB's earnings. Cash earnings were up 17%. The dividend was higher. Credit quality only fell slightly, notwithstanding the slowdown going on in the economy. But profit margins were squeezed, and boss Ross McEwen warned things are getting tougher. Remember, share prices trade on future expected earnings, not past earnings, hence the sell-off. Same deal for ANZ. It posted a record half-year cash profit yesterday of $3.8 billion. But boss Shane Elliott warned that the next 6 months will be tougher. Macquarie Group, which is much less retail than the other big four, also announced a record profit of $5.2 billion for the half year to the end of March, though its boss, Shamara Wickramanayaka, was very cautious about its outlook. And then in the US, we had a bank called Pacific West, a Californian regional, saying it was looking for a buyer. It's got some problems. Its share price fell 50%. Quite remarkable. Just the change in sentiment, just like that, Adam, affecting so many people. No flourishes, just facts.
Geez, these are both good. And they're both international as well as applicable in Australia. So both very topical, timely. Both have economic impact. Both work for my subjective bias. Melodrama, I've got to give that on the melodrama to Michael. But overall, I think Michael has to win this one. The defining week for the future of energy. Great sort of headline title at the top.
But is it really the defining week for the future of energy?
He just said it is, Sean. Let him speak.
I suppose there are about seven stories in there, so maybe.
Including one of yours.
Including one of mine, that's right.
So, Michael, well done. You win this one for Remarkable Story of the Week.
Oh, thanks, Adam. That's 1-1 now.
The game is on.
We'll take a very quick break, Sean. That will give you an opportunity to find a new story, considering I've stolen one of yours.
Yeah, think quickly, Sean.
Yeah, think quick.
I'm thinking quickly. Righto.
We will come back in a moment with the sleeper story of the week. All right, we are looking for a sleeper story now. So a sleeper story is one that's maybe not getting the attention that it deserves, or the other definition that we always use is that it is a story that's going to become a bigger story further down the track. And so this is always an interesting category. Sean, what have you kind of prepared for us this week with a lot of kind of thought and consideration?
Reference to the fact that you actually stole my sleeper story in your most remarkable story anyway. Oil prices, right? They have tumbled. They are off 15, 20% over the past week or so. Of course, this affects every one of us, or everyone that drives a car at least, because it flows through to the petrol bowser. What's happening in the oil market at the moment is that China has slowed. People are worried about that. People are worried that the US will go into a recession. And indeed, the Federal Reserve Chair, Jerome Powell, said there was a chance that the US would go into recession. If China's slower and the US is in recession, they're the world's two biggest economies, well, you're just not going to get the demand for oil that you had. Suddenly, oil is down around the low 70s, or Brent crude is down around the low $70 a barrel level. Fantastic news for us with cars and things like that. And it actually takes oil prices back to the level of COVID, back to COVID levels, sort of mid-2021 or a bit later than that. Now, if you look at oil prices since about 2014, at the moment, we've had a real spike in them. Prior to COVID, they were much lower than what they are now. Now, in the decade or so before that, they're actually higher. But oil prices have an incredible flow-on effect through the rest of the economy, certainly how we fill up our cars at the bowser. But think of all the transport around the world and how they use diesel and petrol and offshoots of oil. All that becomes cheaper. Inflation. Oil really passes through to inflation. Suddenly that comes off the boil a bit. So the fact that oil prices this week have fallen so much, we've got to see if they remain at those low levels. that's going to have a major, major economic impact around the globe and in Australia and on individuals. So for me, that is the sleeper story of the week, which I've just come up with in the last 3 or 4 minutes. Michael.
That was very good for just
Thank you.
Sean off the cuff Aylmer. That's good. My story was actually one that I mentioned through the week that I was going to do it. I said I was going to do this on the weekend edition. I did not tell you what category, and I bet you didn't expect it to be in the sleeper story category because it is about AI. Doesn't kind of,
AI! I haven't heard of that. What is
right.
that?
Well, let me just paint the picture for you, Sean. I'm just going to explain to you why this is in fact a sleeper story. So we heard this week that the godfather of AI has quit his role at Google because he's worried about the consequences of his life's work. This is 75-year-old Geoffrey Hinton, and he expressed regret about the possible outcomes of his pioneering work on artificial intelligence. Now, if I was to kind of simplify it, it is essentially about the potential for these, as you mentioned through the week, Sean, killer robots that are smarter than humans.
Facts not flourish. Go on.
Now, I've tried to raise this topic in the past on the weekend edition, and this is why I got so incensed through the week, because it didn't win last time. But it deserves to win today, and it deserves to win in the sleeper category. Last month, so Jeremy Fleming, the head of the UK's Intelligence, Cyber and Security Agency, warned UK Cabinet about the damaging potential of this AI, of these chatbots. We've had Google Chief Executive Sundar Pichai admitting that the speed at which this technology is developing is the thing that's keeping him awake at night. You've had Elon Musk and other tech leaders calling for a pause in AI research, and Musk has been meeting with US politicians about the need for regulation. So, the elephant in the room here is obviously kind of, why is this a sleeper story? Well, thank you for asking. It is because of the very definition of a sleeper story, not necessarily one that's flying under the radar. I'm not arguing that, not at all. But because of the definition that I give every week, that this could become a much bigger story down the track. So if we apply that very definition to this story, that is right where this story lies. Because it's a story that's gaining momentum rapidly, and it will become a bigger story soon, a much bigger story soon. Maybe that's when the killer robots arrive. And if killer robots, can I just say this? If killer robots do start hunting us down, I'll be looking to you, Adam, to say, told you so. Bigger story now, isn't it? Bit bigger now. Sleeper story. Winner. Adam.
Michael, great. Look, you did add to your points with melodrama. Subjective bias, very good. Frankly, this story is so big, I don't know how much bigger it can be. So,
killer robots. Knock on the door. Go, oh, that knock sounded a little bit metallic. That doesn't sound like a human fist. And then you open the door. It's a bloody robot. He's here to kill you. That's a big story.
Sean, I think we've brought out the author in him. It's a book. So, Sean, yours, as you spoke of it, I drew all the things together. The oil prices, the significance of them, the economic impact, not just to the petrol bowser, but to many aspects of industry and inflation. China slowing. US probably not expected to go into recession, but there is a risk. I think oil prices are a massive story and underappreciated. So I have to give this one to you for Sleeper Story of the Week.
You have just made my day, because during the week when Michael's story came up about the killer robots, he said, I'm taking this and I reckon I've got it this week. And so if I don't win, so be it. But that category, particularly since Michael had stolen my actual first story, which would have probably lost it if I'd used that one. That's made my weekend.
I like a challenge. I just thought, you know what? I reckon I can make this fit a sleeper story, because it is. And turns out I can't. So there we go. Good chat. Let's go to favourite story. 2-1.
2-1.
Not beyond you, Michael.
Well, it's complete
You
bollocks.
can do it.
No, I can't. I mean, I don't want to give up too early, but I have a feeling Sean's probably got this. Shall I go first on this one?
Yes, please do.
Okay. Well, look, I would normally put an airline story in here, but seeing as it was the biggest story of the week, is in Qantas, I have to kind of work through the process of elimination and came to another story. And I think this is actually a really good one. It is about the federal government, announcing plans to phase out vaping, which I think is terrific news. I hate it. I absolutely hate when I'm walking down the street, and this happened to me last night, and someone in front of me is vaping, and the cloud of vapor is just so big, you can't escape it. You can't walk around it. It's like walking through a ghost, and it's just like, this is unpleasant.
Killer robots, ghosts. It's quite the episode today.
It's like walking through a slightly stinky ghost, and it's just not fun. So, and look, I know that this makes me sound like a bit of a whinger, but you know what? I don't care, because this was originally supposed to be a way for smokers to quit, but it's become a recreational product. So it's kind of, you know what it's like, actually? It's kind of like cane toads being introduced to get rid of the cane beetle and actually becoming a bigger problem themselves. Because you've got 1 in 6 teenagers between the ages of 14 and 17 having now vaped, and 1 in 4 between the ages of 18 and 24. The government's going to ban imports of non-prescription vaping products, which aren't supposed to have nicotine in them. It's also banning the single-use disposable ones. This is where it gets interesting. Vapes won't be available in retail stores anymore, only in pharmacies. They'll need to have plain packaging and plain flavours. Good. About time. Adam, there's a tax element to all these changes too, because I know that you love talking about tax. Health Minister Mark Butler declaring the tax on tobacco will be increased by 5% a year for 3 years. Over the next 4 years, Sean, you mentioned this through the week, a pack of 25 cigarettes is going to cost around $50. It sounds like it's getting towards being prohibitively expensive. Might just be easier just to ban the lot. You know, I just say, yeah, I know that there's a lot of tax revenue that comes in to the government for it, but you know what? The health benefits outweigh the revenue. I'm drifting away now. I feel like I went off early with my stinky ghost, and now I've got nothing left. Ban vapes, ban smoking. I'm done. Sean, what have you got?
You left it on the field. I like that. I like that. Look. My favourite story, and I'm sort of slightly shudder to say it, it's just such a big weekend for Charles III, you know, with their king tonight, Saturday night, taking a 6-horse-drawn carriage to Westminster Abbey to officially become our king of the empire. I mean, not only is he the eldest monarch to assume the throne, but he's also the richest, and no one in Australia cares. That's what I love about this story. No one here really, until today probably, no one's really been talking about the coronation, because I'm one of the few people that actually likes King Charles III. I think he's just a bit wacky. He's big on the environment, has been big on the environment for many, many years, well before it became trendy. He has raised plenty of money for charity, billions of dollars. In fact, he's the president of 19 charitable trusts, which raise about $200 million a year. He's a patron of more than 400 charities. He's also sort of done a pretty good job since his mother died, I reckon. Now, another part of this story which I love from this week is our Mia of the Week. Well, I don't know if it's a Mia of the Week, but certainly one of our Mias this week was Sean Turnell. Sean was the man who was held in a Burma jail for 21 months and only released late last year. He actually had an audience with the king, and he sent us here at Fear and Greed a photo of him and the king and Sean's wife Ha all together. I just think putting all that's kind of just my favourite story of the week. The fact that we're getting a new king, no one in Australia cares, and one of our Mias was talking to him last week. Michael.
That's very cool.
It's kind of cool.
That is actually just really cool. I mean, objectively awesome. That is great. I mean, obviously, Adam, the decision is yours. Please let us know.
Yes. So they are both excellent, both topical, timely. I think the vaping one has it on economic impact. Subjective bias, work on both for me. Melodrama. Sean, I was a bit worried until you brought it home with Sean Turnell. That was excellent. But Michael, I have to give this one to you this week. Your combination of comparison to cane toads, stinky ghosts, banned vapes, banned smoking at the end. I have to give this one to you for favourite story of the week.
Oh, you can't get much closer than this. It's 2-2. We've got to go to the points.
So 2 stories all. Sean, you come in at a very high 94 points. Michael, credible 91.
If you listen carefully, you could actually hear the hope just escaping from my body. Like it's just,
Exhale.
oh God, that was so close. I mean, it wasn't that close. I was 3 points in it in the end. I mean, I felt like it was so close.
Yeah, but out of 100, and excellent stories.
Oh, anyway, all right. Okay, well done, Sean. That is an honourable victory.
Thank you, Michael.
And thank you very much, Adam.
Thank you, Michael.
All right. Now, don't forget you can stay up to date on all the business news with Alexa and your Amazon Echo smart speaker. Oh, I need to talk to you next week, Sean. I'll do it during the week about some of the other features of Alexa where you can actually get her to insult you.
Oh, really?
It is good fun. It is actually a lot of fun. So, I mean, we talked about how kind of polite and courteous kind of Alexa is. She doesn't always have to be that way, that there is a bit of sass in there. So anyway, I'll take you through my experiments with Alexa during the week. But in the meantime, all you have to do is say, Alexa, play the Fear and Greed podcast to get the latest episode, and you can get yours now at amazon.com.au. Make sure you're following the podcast. Join us online on LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. I'm Michael Thompson. Have a great weekend.